Congratulations, you have just found the #1 over 50 health and wellness podcast on the planet. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and the founder of The Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women just like you build lean, strong, healthy, capable bodies that they love for the rest of their lives. Today, we have a special treat for you as we dive into the wildly popular topic of intermittent fasting. This episode comes from a webinar that I hosted earlier this year, and it's a topic that's generated a ton of buzz, and I'm here to separate fact from fiction. We're going to define what intermittent fasting really means, and we'll examine its potential benefits and addressing the wild claims surrounding it. I'll also be sharing practical advice on how you might incorporate intermittent fasting into your life, and we'll touch on our over 50 intermittent fasting blueprint, a very straightforward and manageable approach to help you achieve your health and fitness goals. So sit back, relax, and get ready to gain some valuable insights on intermittent fasting.
So, welcome everyone to the Over 50 Guide to Intermittent Fasting for Health, Longevity, and Weight Loss webinar. I'm really excited to dig into this topic. This is a very popular topic. All of you on this call, I'm guessing, have got some interest or some maybe potentially some experience here with intermittent fasting. But because it's become so popular lately and it's gotten so many wild claims behind it, thought we would take some time and just sort of pull this apart a little bit to separate fact from fiction, if you will. All right. First things first, for those of you that don't know me, let me just do a real quick, brief introduction. My name is Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert, and I am the founder of The Silver Edge. That's our business where our mission is to help men and women, primarily in their 50s and 60s, build lean, strong, capable, strong bodies that they love for the rest of their lives. And we do that through a number of different things. We do events like these, webinars, social media, of course. We have a podcast, the Over 50 Health and Wellness Podcast. And we also have one-on-one personalized online nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle coaching services. We also, before I started recording, I think most of you heard, we have a couple of our coaches in here. We have Coach Monica and Coach Jess. Coach Russell, I didn't see him come in, but he may be in here. He's another one of our coaches as well. At any rate, tonight we are going to dive into this topic. Has generated a ton of interest in the health, wellness, nutrition, longevity community, and that's intermittent fasting. You'll see it abbreviated here as IF and other places as well. Here's what we're going to do. Obviously, this is the intro, the welcome, but we're going to define what is intermittent fasting, because it's kind of an amorphous term, and we're going to define what we mean when we say intermittent fasting, how that's different from prolonged fasting, perhaps. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about why. Why should you care about intermittent fasting? Why might we consider intermittent fasting? What are some of the claims? And we're also going to kind of look at the validity of some of these claims. So there are a lot of wild claims about intermittent fasting right now. It seems to be kind of all the rage. Put it up there with things like all of a sudden cold plunge seems to be really, really popular. And while there absolutely are benefits to cold plunge, it seems to be a little overhyped sometimes. So we're going to try and separate some fact from fiction. And what I want you guys to leave this webinar with this evening is just a clearer understanding of intermittent fasting, what its potential benefits are, and maybe some practical advice on how you might or might not incorporate this in your life. And I'll say this right now, where you have a little section where I'm going to talk about what types of people absolutely should not consider intermittent fasting. We talk about what types of people should, and we're going to come up with called the Over 50 Intermittent Fasting Blueprint. We didn't invent it. It's not any proprietary secret knowledge, but just how the way I feel that those of us in our 50s, 60s, maybe even 70s might implement this in order to help us achieve our health, longevity, and fitness goals. Make sense? Let's do it. Oh, and just the other thing, just for housekeeping here, just a couple of things. I would love for you guys to ask questions. There's a couple ways you can do that. The easiest way is just holler, hey, wait. Feel free to challenge me. Feel free to ask questions as we go. That's fine. You can also type questions in the chat. I won't see them as we go along, but I'll see them at the end. We'll have a time for Q&A at the end as well. The other thing I'd ask is if you're not asking a question, if you don't mind muting You'll have to remember to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. That just kind of helps with this is being recorded. Probably a bunch of people are going to watch it after the fact as well. So it kind of helps for the recording quality. All right, let's hit it. Let's talk about what intermittent fasting is. And I want to start before we define exactly what we mean when we say intermittent fasting. Let's talk about fasting as a whole, right? So fasting as a phenomenon has been around for as long as there have been humans, basically, right? Once upon a time, food scarcity, food uncertainty meant that we would have evolved to withstand periods, even long periods, with very little to no food, right? So way, way back in our DNA, from the very first humans onto, more agricultural society, intermittent fasting was just a way of life, right? Fast forward a little bit, and I think it's very interesting to note that darn near every single religious tradition in the world has incorporated some sort of fasting practice or ritual into their belief system or into their faith. So we're not going to dig into prolonged fasting very much, other than to distinguish what's the difference between prolonged fasting and intermittent fasting. But just note that there's this long history of fasting. And there's also, I believe, a little bit of conflation between the benefits between prolonged fasting and intermittent fasting. So we're going to pull some of that apart. When we talk about intermittent fasting, as most of us are using it today in the health, fitness, nutrition, longevity communities, we're really talking about breaking up a 24-hour cycle into these feeding windows and these fasting windows. The far and away the most common, as you can see, I have some examples down here, is the 16-8. And what that means is 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating. So very typically the way that looks is you eat your dinner, you stop eating. Let's say you don't eat after 8 o'clock at night, or drink, by the way. Go through the night, you skip your breakfast, you don't have a brunch, and you don't eat until noon the next day. So that would give you an 8-hour feeding window between 12 and 8, right? And you would be fasting. That's the most common. And as we're talking about intermittent fasting today, that's the kind of intermittent fasting that I'm referring to when I say that these are the benefits and these maybe aren't so much the benefits. We're talking about breaking up that 24 cycle. Now, there's a lot of ways people do intermittent fasting. There is the 18-6, which is 18. So it's just a shorter feeding window, 6-hour feeding window. There's the OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. So getting more and more aggressive. Believe it or not, there are people who fast and only eat 1 meal a day. There are people who do that all the time. There are people who do intermittently or maybe even sporadically. 5-2 is it's catching, I see this a little more typically in the longevity community, but it's 5 days of normal eating in a week and 2 days, usually of either no eating, so a 24-hour fast, or very, very low calorie being sub 400 calories, for example, on 2 non-consecutive days in a week. So just so you know, there's probably an endless variety of ways you could do intermittent fasting. For our purposes here, when we say intermittent fasting, we're referring to basically 16-8 or 18-6, or somebody eating in an 8 to 4 hour window in a day for various reasons, right? So let's hop into some claims, intermittent fasting claims. So there are more than these, but these are some of the most popular, right? So most of us have heard, obviously, health claims around intermittent fasting, but intermittent fasting recently has really been marketed strongly as kind of a miracle weight loss tool. And it usually goes like this. And I tell Monica's probably shaking her head like this. If you're a nutrition coach and somebody meets you and say, "Hey, what do you do?" "Oh, I'm a nutrition coach," right? One of the first things people tend to ask, or one of the most common questions we get asked, one is about carbs and keto. The other is about intermittent fasting. And usually it goes something like this. I have a friend at work whose cousin lost 50 pounds doing intermittent fasting. Do you think that, what are your thoughts? Do you think I should try it? And so I want to pull that apart. We're going to make that a separate part of this discussion. Let's just kind of talk through some of these claims. Intermittent fasting, some of the claims are it will lower insulin and your blood sugar. So it'll lower basically your risk for type 2 diabetes. It will lower your blood pressure. It may improve your cholesterol markers. It may increase HGH, which is human growth hormone, which both guys and gals, when we have higher levels of HGH, GH, that is associated with fat burning and lean muscle production. So that's a good thing. There are similar claims around hormones, mostly sexual hormones. So for guys and girls, testosterone is increased in intermittent fasting. And for ladies, we see a better balance, or the claim is there is a better balance of progesterone and estrogen when we are in this intermittent fasting state. What else? Reduce oxidative stress and inflammation at the cellular level. That's a big one. People still coming in. Sorry about that. We have increased longevity, and this is a big one, right? So there's a whole, if you're not aware, there is a community of people who are really they're biohackers, and they're not necessarily trying to be the best performers or the best looking, but they want to live the longest. And they're big. A lot of those folks will make claims that intermittent fasting is the way to go. There's some reasons why they might think that. We can talk about that in a minute. Improve metabolic flexibility. I see this one thrown around. And basically what that means is your body's ability to switch between burning carbs and burning fat for fuel. So again, that being metabolically flexible is a desired state to be in. If that would be a good thing. Cellular repair. You may hear this as autophagy. As cells die, there's this cleanup, this important cleanup process that's called autophagy. It's a critical part of our human biology that gets thrown around a lot. So intermittent fasting, we say, hey, we see better autophagy when in a fasted state. And then we get the claims of weight loss. So I'm sure pretty much everybody here probably is familiar with that claim. When you do intermittent fasting, it's a good way to lose weight. And you notice I've got this separated from fat loss, obviously, or maybe not so obviously, but weight loss and fat loss are two different things. But when intermittent fasting people talk about fat loss, their claim is that when you're in that fasted state, you switch from burning carbs as fuel, which is your body's preferred source. If you have compared to glucose, is very readily available for the body to use for energy, and your liver stores a little for later, and then excess gets stored as fat. But the idea is when we're in this fasted state, the body uses up all the carbs that we ate, say the night before, and then switches to burning fat, which again, that would be a good thing, right? If you're talking about burning fat. So those are the claims. Let's take a look kind of at where the science is today. Now, before we kind of go through this list, know that the science is all over the place. Everybody here probably is aware of the phenomenon that no matter what position I take, I can go and cite a medical study to prove my point, whether it's you should be vegan, you should be carnivore, you should intermittent fast, you should eat 10 meals a day. I can go find a study that supports that position. Kind of a frustrating place to be. But when you think about something like intermittent fasting, and especially in, like, say, a classic 16-8, it's really, really tough for us to do good, controlled human studies over a long period of time. Basically, I'd want to get a couple thousand people ideally, but even just a couple hundred people, and I'd want to put them in a room, and I want them to be in this sterile environment where I can monitor everything. I can monitor their movement. I can monitor their caloric intake. I can monitor their micronutrients. And I can keep all of these things the same. And like I said, the only difference is this person eats in an 8-hour window. This person eats whenever they want, right? We don't have many of those studies. We do have some good animal studies because we can do crazy things we have lots of mice studies. We have, believe it or not, there are lots of longevity studies on intermittent fasting with fruit flies. Not sure why necessarily fruit flies, but you see them a lot in the literature. So just know that I'm getting ready to say, hey, these are things that are most likely going to be true for intermittent fasting. You see, I got my little guy doing this, and that means the science is still out. We don't really know. There's just as many studies on one side versus the other. Long-term studies may prove that, for example, your blood pressure is improved by intermittent fasting. Maybe. We just don't know. We don't have enough evidence to know in humans that is a reliable fact, and we control for all other factors that it is the time restriction that is causing blood pressure. The other thing we run up against when we look at intermittent fasting claims is this sort of health bias. And we run into this all the time when we do nutrition studies, when we're asking people to, say, fill a survey out or to participate in something other than a randomized controlled trial. And that is this, that if people are practicing, or say it this way, people who choose to intermittent fast most likely have a bias for health. In other words, most people that are doing 16/8 are doing so because they want to be healthier. They want to increase their longevity. Maybe they're doing it to increase performance for some reason. Very often they're doing it as a weight loss. And these people might have other healthy behaviors that would make us think that, hey, we're seeing this lower cholesterol, we're seeing this improved hormonal profile, etc. Anyway, that's just a big, long-winded caveat to say this is intermittent fasting is still pretty young. We certainly don't have generational studies of the impact, the health impact of intermittent fasting. So know that this is still a bit of a minefield that we're trying to step through, right? That being said, blood sugar, insulin, it does appear that people who eat in a shorter time window, say 8 hours a day, do in fact seem to have a modest blood sugar insulin type effect. So that would be a good thing. Now, how much? That's really hard to say. It's really hard to define for all the reasons we've just described, but there does seem to be a modest effect positively. Blood cholesterol, blood pressure, and cholesterol, again, kind of 50-50, maybe not. Increase in HGH as well as our testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, that does seem to improve. So that does seem to improve with intermittent fasting. Inflammation does seem to improve with intermittent fasting. Kind of makes sense, right? We're giving our bodies a chance to rest from this digestion process when we're taking a break from eating. Increase longevity. Yeah. Trials, absolutely. We can increase the lifespan of a mouse by about, I think it's 14% in most recent studies by just changing when they eat and controlling everything else. Obviously, we've not, and on humans, we don't know that we can do that, but it may bear out in some point in the future that we can get 10, 14% longer lives just by controlling when we eat. Improving metabolic flexibility, probably not. We'll pick that apart here in a minute, but there's not any good studies one way or the other. Cellular repair, autophagy, we are not getting that by fasting for 16 hours. The science is pretty clear on this right now. You would need to be in a fasted state for a minimum of 36 hours, and we're all bio-individuals, so some of us maybe more than others, before we really see an increase in this cellular repair. We're probably not giving our bodies a long enough fasted state to see that autophagy really ramp up. Now, to be clear, all of our bodies are already doing cellular repair. They do it, and typically it happens while we sleep. But there does seem to be an increase with prolonged fasting. There does not seem to be much of an increase in intermittent fasting, the way we're describing it here. Weight loss. This is now pretty clear when we control for calories and macronutrients, meaning we have a study group and they all eat 1,800 calories and they get 25% from protein and they split the fat and the carbs exactly the same. One group eats whenever they want. One group eats in an 8-hour feeding window. There is no difference in weight loss. If they are in a calorie deficit in the study, they typically lose weight about the same rate. There's not a statistical difference one way and the other in weight loss. So it seems to be ineffective for weight loss from a biological perspective. Now, what we do see, because there's a lot of claims about, my buddy at work lost 30 pounds doing intermittent fasting. What your buddy at work did was put himself or herself in a calorie deficit by not eating times when they normally would be eating. So we're going to talk about that more in the future, but you might imagine that if you're somebody who has a couple of beers, or maybe you've got a popcorn addiction at night, or maybe you're reaching for Doritos or cookies late night, your late night snacker. If you decided to do intermittent fasting and all that late night snacking is now cut out, certainly, or maybe you're somebody who hits the Krispy Kremes every morning and gets a big coffee concoction creation and a couple donuts to go, and you cut that out, you can see how that would have a weight loss and health effect. It's not because the time that you're eating in, it's because the eating behavior you're performing, right? Again, more on that in just a minute. And fat loss, burning fat for fuel, here's the deal. Absolutely not for intermittent fasting unless you are really, really low carb. It Most of us are having just a normal amount of carbs in a day and for the standard American, 500 grams. It's a lot. Your liver stores excess, takes in the carbs, converts it to glucose, and it stores some for later because, again, it's your body's preferred fuel source. And when you fast for 16 hours, you're not burning through that carb. The body's just too good at storing that carb and using it for fuel. You're not getting into that fat burning zone unless you're somebody who eats really, really low carb. So sub 150 grams of carb a day. You probably don't have enough carb in you to sustain you for that 16 hours. In that case, yes, you may switch over to burning fat for fuel. I want to finish with this when we talk about some of the claims of intermittent fasting. Almost everything you see on this list right here in front of you is true for prolonged fasting. There's been some pretty good human studies on, and when I say prolonged fasting, that's going to be anything over 24 hours of, say, a water fast. So all you're having is water. There's no calories in there. We do see, all of these markers improve. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for those of you maybe that are considering longer, prolonged fasts, 48-hour fast, 72-hour fast, 24-hour fast, etc. You will see some of these. So let's talk a lot about when you eat. I want to talk about now is where this fits into the echelon of healthy behaviors. We want to be, I'm assuming everybody here wants to be a badass 50, 60, 70-year-old, right? We want to be healthy, we want to be lean, we want to be strong. Where does when we eat fit into this, into the list of priority? So let's take a look. My question to you is, what's more important? When we eat, how much we eat, what we eat? And you can see I've got a little graphic of a pyramid here. So at the base, what are we going to put there at the base? What are we going to put in the middle? What are we going to put at the top? And I guess before we kind of figure out where we put these, let's define what we mean by what's more important. So some of you who've been around here for a while may have heard me talk about your health goals. You can visualize them as this pyramid on the screen, right? As a triangle. And at the top, we'll have aesthetics. For most of us, that's going to be, say, weight loss, or I want a six-pack. So it's the way we look, right? I want to lose weight. I want to build muscle. That's an aesthetic goal. Most normal cases, right? Think of a bodybuilder. That's an extreme aesthetic goal. We have down here in the corner of our triangle, we have performance. And that's going to be, I want to be an absolute beast in my sport. I want to win my age division in a powerlifting competition or a triathlon or maybe a pickleball tournament. That performance, and the professional athlete would be the extreme of a performance goal. And then over on the other side, we have the health and longevity goal. In other words, I don't really care about aesthetics. I don't need to have a six-pack abs. Care about being able to sprint faster than everybody else my age division. I just want to live to be 125 or something, right? Those goals are, the further you move towards one of those, the further you move away from the other. So for example, the more extreme I am with an aesthetic goal, let's say I'm getting ready to turn 60 and my goal is to compete in a bodybuilding show during my 60th year. So I'm going to prepare for a bodybuilding show. Doing so will take me further and further away from that health goal. The activities that I'll have to participate in order to get that, to get that much muscle, and then to lean out to probably 4 or 5% body fat to get on stage, would be moving me far away from health and longevity. Similarly, if I said, hey, you know what, I'm going to be 60 and I want to go to nationals in, let's say, powerlifting. So powerlifting, if you don't know, is your 1 rep max of a squat, a deadlift, and a bench press. That's a very aggressive performance goal. And again, I'm moving away from the things I would do for that performance goal would move me away from certainly six-pack abs, and it would certainly move me further away from longevity. And likewise, the further I move towards longevity, the probably the less I'm going to be a peak performer or peak asset. Does that make sense to everybody? Just want to clarify that. And when we talk about what's more important, I feel like what we eat is the foundation for all three of those. Whether your goal is aesthetics, whether your goal is performance, or whether your goal really is, I just want to live to be 130. I feel like the next most important piece of this puzzle nutritionally is how much we eat. Some of us should eat more food. Some of us should eat less food. Some of us, we should all know what our maintenance calories are and strive to have a fast metabolism that's adequately and sufficiently burning the calories that we take in each day. I feel like the least important part of this equation is when we eat. So in other words, do I skip breakfast? Do I eat breakfast? Do I eat in a 6-hour window? Do I eat in an 8-hour window? When do I eat? While it can have shown we are pretty sure, the science is pretty solid, that there are some health benefits to when we eat. A modest amount, but there are some health benefits, right? So you want to take that into consideration. But until you've really mastered what you eat, by what you eat, I mean, hey, just for starters, let's swap out processed and ultra processed foods for real whole foods. Most of us over 50, we should be eating more protein, and that should be coming from lean protein sources, good, healthy, lean protein sources. We can throw in things like hydration, et cetera, in there. We should, speak for myself, should be eating a whole lot more vegetables than I do, right? But just that movement towards real whole food, how much we eat, obviously, that's that calorie balance. If I eat below my maintenance calories, I should predictably be able to lose weight. If I eat above my calories, and you might be thinking, well, why would you eat above your calories? If you want to build muscle, you have to be in a calorie surplus, not a big calorie surplus necessarily, but you do need to be in a calorie surplus to build significant amounts of muscle for most of us, certainly for resistance trained men and women. That is absolutely true. So how much we eat is important. When we eat could be important, depending on your goals, but less so. Does that make sense? All right. So let's recap. Intermittent fasting might be a good idea for overall health and longevity. And certainly we know that periodic prolonged fasting, I mean, you don't want to prolonged fast all the time. That would start to work. Too much of any good thing is no longer a good thing. But know that intermittent fasting is not really a good mechanism or effective. It's not effective for long-term permanent weight loss unless you're somebody who really enjoys eating that way and it puts those guardrails on your eating. So if you're a messy breakfast, if you're just, hey, I've got to smash all the carbs and have a giant ice cream sundae coffee for my breakfast, but when I intermittent fast, I cut that out. If you love doing it and you could see yourself doing it for the rest of your life, there's no reason why that wouldn't work for you. Certainly, I wouldn't try and talk you out of it, right? For both of us, providing that you are hitting your protein goals, hitting your calorie goals, and you can do that within whatever that window is. But intermittent fasting is absolutely marketed to us as as a panacea for weight loss, as this magic. If you just eat in this amount of time, you're going to lose all this weight. Probably not. Again, if you're somebody who's got this horrible nighttime snacking and you stop nighttime snacking, you don't need to intermittent fast for that. That's a behavior-based thing, right? So don't love it for weight loss. Seems to have some reasonable health benefits. It might be worth playing with if that works for you. Keeping in mind that what you eat, how much you eat is more important than when you eat. Now, before we kind of jump into what I do recommend from an intermittent fasting standpoint, I want to just talk about a couple of exceptions because I feel like there is a healthy way for 95% of us over 50 to intermittent fast and adopt this and really make it make sense in our life. But there's a few people who absolutely should not be practicing intermittent fasting. The very first is anybody who's pregnant or nursing. Now that's, I'm guessing, on a limb, but hopefully that's not you. It's our daughters, it's our daughter-in-laws, right? So these people should not be in the more aggressive of that time window, that eating window. So in other words, the shorter that time window, the less that's a good idea. It's a horrible idea for pregnant nursing women. It's also not a good idea for anybody with a poor relationship with food or a disordered eating. So by folks that just really have bad relationships with food, poor body image issues, have that all or nothing kind of mentality, this can become that very restrictive mentality of I can only eat here. So that you're obsessive compulsive eaters, you folks have the history of bulimia or anorexia in your past. I strongly do not recommend intermittent fasting for you folks. There are many, many other things you can do to really um, sh- take care of your health and your body composition that have nothing to do with when you eat. And the final category of people that I'm not a fan of any type of restrictive time eating is for you beasts out there, you monsters, you competitive athletes, you high performers. If you, the more aggressive your, look at people coming in, the more aggressive your goals are, your performance goals or your aesthetic goals. Remember going back to my example, if I wanted, I don't, by the way, I'm not going to do a bodybuilding or a powerlifting competition this year, but if I didn't want to, intermittent fasting would be a horrible idea, right? Both of those, food and calories would be very, very important. In the case of being a power lifter, I would just be smashing all of the calories in order to build that much muscle. I would be eating a lot and then dieting a lot for, say, a very extreme aesthetic goal. But the more you have, if you're a competitive athlete, things like that, even weekend warriors, probably the less this is going to serve you. You're probably going to be better to be in that steady fed state for your goal, right? So, home stretch here. The over 50 intermittent fasting blueprint, again, 12-12 intermittent fasting is not our idea. It's been around for a long time. I've not heard it talked about a whole lot until recently, and maybe that's because I went looking for it. Now I seem to see it more often. But 12-12 just simply says, got two rules. Don't eat or drink after dinner. Now, most of us that are eating or drinking after dinner are not making healthy choices. I'm going to guess that there's not one person here right now, 20 something of you in this group, and however many people listen to this afterwards. None of you at 9 o'clock on the couch watching Netflix is like, damn, I'm in the mood for just a spring salad, a nice, I want some dark leafy greens right now. You're reaching for Oreos, you're reaching for Doritos, you're reaching for popcorn, you're getting, some of you are grabbing beer or wine or a mixed drink. So when we implement 12-12, we say, okay, I'm going to eat and drink until dinner, and then I'm not having any calorie containing liquids and no food after that. So you can have water if you want, right? But that's the first rule. And then the second rule is 12 hours later. So let's say I close my eating window, right? That 12-hour eating window at 7 o'clock. Then I have breakfast at or around 7 o'clock the next morning. And I make that high protein breakfast 12 hours later. So this does a couple of things. One is we just talked about, it knocks out that bad behavior that many of us have of late night snacking, of eating, because again, the food choices we make when we're watching TV, playing cards, going over to the neighbor's house, whatever it is we're doing in the evenings, typically aren't really healthy. Getting chicken breast and salad, most of us aren't. So we're knocking that out. The other thing we're knocking out, let's say if you say, hey, okay, let's see how this would work. If you're saying don't eat breakfast till 7, but I usually have my coffee because I'd like to get up at 5. I make coffee. I have coffee. For me, I drink coffee black, so it's not a big deal. So I have a black coffee. I had 1.5 cups typically. But if you're somebody who needs cream and sugar, I would say delay that coffee until that 12-hour window is up, right? Because if you have even a teaspoon of sugar and a little bit of cream, you are no longer in a fasted state in the minute you take a sip of that. So there's nothing magic about 12-12. This could easily be 14-10, right? Again, we're talking about rather modest health improvements from intermittent fasting. But I want to leave you with this thought. Your human biology has intermittent fasting already built into it. You don't really need to amplify it if you don't want to. And that mechanism is sleep. When we sleep, we are in a fasted state. All the autophagy and all of the repair, all of your hormones, your muscle building, all of that happens in the REM and deep stages of sleep. And you are in a fasted state as you sleep. The reason we call breakfast is because we are literally breaking our fast. So if you just think of intermittent fasting, if you want a way to make it make sense and kind of be easy to implement and maybe knock out a couple of bad habits, maybe you wake up in the morning and you have, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 scoops of sugar in your coffee or something, I would encourage maybe to have less sugar, but delay it just a little bit. have that high protein breakfast in the morning, start your day, get ahead of that protein goal. I think if for those of you that have been around our circle, you know that we want our active 50 and 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds to be aiming for somewhere between 0.7 and 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So I'm 200 pounds. I like to get 200 grams of protein a day. That's a lot. So a 130-pound woman, or maybe it's a woman that's 160 pounds, but her ideal body weight is 130 pounds, somewhere between 100 and 130 grams of protein. It's probably going to be a lot of protein for her. And if she doesn't get a jump start on that in the morning, i.e. a high protein breakfast, she's really not going to be able to hit those goals, at least very easily. So that's what I've got for you. I do want to leave you with just a couple of resources and then, of course, open up for questions. But in terms of resources, most of you in here, I've recognized a lot of names and faces as you guys came in. Probably most of you know we have a podcast. It's the Over 50 Health and Wellness Podcast. Episode 270 goes live tomorrow morning. So we have got a ton of resources there. There's even a couple of, I've done at least 2, maybe 3 of those episodes on intermittent fasting. And I brought on an intermittent fasting expert because, she's somebody who I think she practices 16/8. And she's one of the first people I heard say, oh no, 12/12 is a great way to do intermittent fasting. You can check that out. But we have podcasts on, at this point, pretty much all the topics you could think of when it comes to healthy aging. We have a bunch of free guides over at silveredgefree.com. Just go there and you can just download any guides you want. We have a fabulous Facebook group. It's called the Over 50 Lean Body Blueprint. If you're not in there, I would highly recommend you get in there. All my coaches are in there. We answer questions all the time. You can find a community there. People support you. Again, ask questions. So great resource for you there. We have a free metabolic assessment. You can also find that at silveredgefree.com. So it's right at the top where the free guides are. Sign up for that. And basically what that is, 30-minute call with me to talk about your metabolism, what you can do. I give you that 30 to 45 day kind of a roadmap for what we can do to write out the low-hanging fruit. What can you do based on your individual circumstances to try and start to optimize that metabolism a little bit? And of course, we have one-on-one coaching. So this is personalized online nutrition, exercise, lifestyle coaching. And it's a 6-month journey. We have a very specific framework that we use for all of our folks for keeping them accountable, helping them get to their goals. So with that being said, questions, comments, what call BS, anything at all. I'm going to stop my share here so I can see you.
Kevin,
Yes, sir.
so I know that you've mentioned in some of the other podcasts and stuff that you do intermittent fasting on occasion, not necessarily specifically health-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you do that?
So yeah, I do 12/12. And if I'm up and out really early in the morning and I ate later in the night, I don't sweat it. But as a general rule, I try and get 12 hours of fasting. I do a 24-hour fast about once a month, and I've done some longer prolonged fasts.
Right.
And for me, if there's health benefits, fabulous. I'll take them. I do them more for spiritual, meditative reasons. I feel like just being in that deprived state just brings awareness into my body. I like to sit with that as opposed to distract myself from it. It's just a personal preference for me.
Yeah.
Great question. Yeah.
Kind of concentrate on other things and food, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And, pretty sure everybody on here can relate to that phenomenon where you're standing in front of the pantry. For me, it's going to be eating chips, right? Just trying to decide whether I want chips or not. I'm not hungry. I'm bored, or I'm wound up, or I'm anxious, or I'm sad. I'm eating for a reason other than hunger. And so being able to identify the difference between that you're not hungry, you're eating for another reason, and this is what hunger feels like. You go, done as long as 2-hour fast, you come face to face with what hunger actually feels like. And I believe there's some good feedback of the mind as well as the body that you can get from prolonged fasting. Yes, sir. Thanks. Any other questions before we wrap it up here?
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I want to let you know that we have other free resources over at silveredgefree.com. There, you'll find our free guides with our top tips on nutrition, exercise, and healthy lifestyle to assist you in your weight loss and fitness journey. So feel free to head over there and download anything that looks useful to you. I'll put links to everything we talked about in the show notes. You folks can find those over at silveredgefitness.com/286. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to please give this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.